Before I start, I'd like to thank very much the International Federation for inviting me, and in particular, Dr. Sylvia Rosen for extending this opportunity for my participation in this program. And I'm also very glad that all of you and myself share the ideal that we need to improve the quality of life of those confronted with spina bifida and hydrocephalus, and that we all share the responsibility to reduce its prevalence and inherent difficulties in their medical and social care. In essence, I will stress the notion that prevention care and prevention are actually one unit. Prevention precedes care, prevention follows care, and the best care is prevention. The views I am going to present are also found under the title shown here, Care, Ideal, Practice, and Reality, in the Book of Abstracts. I think it is a natural question that you should ask, where are the roots of these ideals I will be talking about? My view of public health is that it's not only science, it's not only politics, but in essence, it is an issue of ethics. We need to prevent anything we know how to prevent. Regarding children and their development, I had a role in the formulation of a World Alliance for the Prevention of Birth Defects, which then upheld the ideal that every child has the human right to be born free of preventable birth defects. And spina bifida, indeed, is one of the most preventable congenital malformations we know about. Furthermore, I am aware and was one of the participants to establish the existence of a spina bifida epidemic in Ukraine. It is also logical for you to ask, where can you find more about me? So here is a link to the Wikipedia. In this particular page, you're going to find a list of publications and many other details that in general are irrelevant to this presentation. You may also ask, why Ukraine? Because in Ukraine was Chernobyl, and ionizing radiation is a known major factor that causes developmental anomalies. The US term is birth defects, invented by the foundation of the March of Dimes initiated by President Roosevelt. But in other languages, it does not translate well. So indeed, we started documenting facts. But facts alone are not enough. They have to be credible. And for this reason, Ukraine aimed and achieved integration with the trans-European monitoring of developmental anomalies across the continent. The implication being that it's a uniform methodology that allows comparisons between countries and utilizes a methodology endorsed by the European Union and the International Clearinghouse for Birth Defects. It took a decade before we collected sufficient data to be sure, before the data was confirmed, but within the decade, we reported an epidemic of spina bifida, the highest rates in Europe. Like all substantial findings, one should voluntarily submit the observations to the examination of experts and academic institutions. So we published our observations in the Academy of Pediatrics, and 4 years later, we followed by an extensive publication by invitation of the Japanese Teratology Society. Following these two initial observations and reports, we continued publishing, as shown here, with an emphasis on scientific journals of the European continent. And these quite recent publications, based on Eurocat data and collectively analyzed by all the directors of the surveillance systems in the continental Europe, underscores that prevention of neural tube defects in Europe is a generalized public health failure. In Ukraine, we tried to do the best to introduce prevention of neural tube defects through the use of vitamin B9, or otherwise known as folic acid. The usual strategy to prevent neural tube defects is public education, that is, voluntary consumption of folic acid supplements, either as tablets or additions to multivitamins. But it is well known, including in Ukraine, that such policies are an abysmal failure. They had no impact on the frequency of spina bifida and related disorders. In response to this failure, 80 plus nations introduced legislation. But the main point is legislation that is mandatory. It mandates flour fortification with folic acid. Europe objects to the notion of mandatory, not to the notion of fortifying bread with folic acid, but to the notion of mandatory. And currently, Ukraine is considering whether to remain in the European attitude or to join these many countries that have prevented thousands and thousands of children from being impacted and basically significantly destroyed or handicapped by these anomalies. Illustrated here is that for nearly 20 years we had substantial political support for the proposed legislation of mandatory folic acid fortification of flour. And this is an illustration of all the agencies that concurred with the necessity to institute such a policy. But it has failed. The law did not pass. And we attribute this to the lack of evidence of public support, that is, parents and patients in particular. Public support is essential. But in a country like Ukraine, that for nearly a century has been living in a lifestyle that forced people to remain quiet, conquering public support has proven to be very difficult. One of the several strategies we relied on to broaden public support was a series of 10 weekly webinars in Ukrainian concerning care and prevention of spina bifida and hydrocephalus. This intensity, weekly, one after two, three, four, five, six, it was on purpose. It was to ensure that the participants got to know each other and that in each of these 10 webinars we included a segment stressing that the best care is prevention, and at the same time requesting their support to speak up, to provide letters of support. Here are the subjects that may be of interest to you. All speakers are individuals competent in the care of spina bifida, and all of them engaged in the delivery of care. Therefore, they're all Ukrainians from different locations in the country. Another index of success for us was the fact that participants came from every region of Ukraine, including those involved in the civil war with the Soviet Union or Russia that has sent troops to these areas of Ukraine and occupied Crimea. Thus far, I have shared with you facts about neural tube defects in Ukraine as we perceive them. And now, before I conclude this brief presentation, I want to offer a synthesis, three considerations, three suggestions. What is the role of national standards of multidisciplinary care? the care of new mothers of instances of neural tube defects, and what can we all together do concerning every fertile woman and the prevention of neural tube defects. I recognize that the subject of multidisciplinary care standards have been addressed in many publications, but in interest of brevity, I must at least say the following. Indeed, there are many standards of care from the perspective of neurosurgery, occasionally from urology and so forth. But I know very few that are at a national level and address all specialties as a combination and concurrent challenge to offer to patients with neural tube defects. If there is no multidisciplinary care standard, then who is responsible for it? Neurosurgery cannot be responsible for urology and vice versa. And furthermore, if there is no uniform standard of multidisciplinary care, where does prevention fit? It is natural for parents to promote a national standard of multidisciplinary care, for they are the primary beneficiaries. They are effective to the extent that they can create parental organization. That is, I think, self-evident. However, when parents tend to ignore the importance of prevention, they are not as effective promoters because the state or large healthcare organizations are inherently interested in prevention, and parents must not forget this point. The notion of care is complex, and it conveys at times contradictory concepts. But one way to look at it is empathy. Empathy from others toward those who need a helpful hand. Another fact about a new mother confronted with a child with spina bifida is that we all know it is quite of a shocking new reality. It's hard to accept, it's hard to adapt to it. And I think you will agree with me that new mothers may experience bewilderness, solitude, confusion, depression, and that they would benefit from empathy. But empathy without experience is not enough. Many of us have experienced how to confront this reality. Where are the resources? Where are what these parents can actually help their child with? And that is the knowledge of core care providers and experienced mothers. So, who can help new mothers? And certainly, most of us, most of you, most mothers who have experience, most care providers can help new mothers confronting this challenge. Let's do it. Each of our organizations can consider how to do that better. And the third consideration is focused on every woman of reproductive age, which is fertile till proven otherwise. They all have a role to prevent neural tube defects. The question is, how can we stimulate that role? And we tried this pilot effort. Look at the photo. Each bride received a gift. Everyone for 1 year was part of our investigation. A gift for your baby. Forward the gift to your baby. Swallow it daily. Tablets containing folic acid. This approach was found to be positive, affordable, and being voluntary caused no controversy. Being simple, it spread easily. And being effective, most women took the tablets Some may have been pregnant, some may have not. But they should consume the established pregnant or not. For no woman knows when she's going to be pregnant. And when she realizes she's pregnant, it is too late to start taking these tablets. So they need this gift for their baby as soon as possible. Consider this as a possible pilot that you could test and implement in your environment. So, in summary, I think there are three items I would like to suggest to your attention and consideration. That a national standard of multidisciplinary care of spina bifida is critical. Without it, nobody is responsible for coordinated care. The care of new mothers of instances of neural tube defects is very often lacking, and we can remedy that if we keep it in mind. And a pilot of the nature I just described can be imitated in other environments. And I wish, if you do, let us know what is your experience like. And we have reached the end. I enjoyed making this presentation, and I hope so did you. And please accept my best wishes.